Okay, so let's talk about my favorite book, Run the World. Well, my favorite running book, I should say. I don't really have a specific favorite book,
Thank
but
you.
I loved it. I couldn't put it down. So I want to know, and I hope everybody on here has read it. If you haven't, go and pick it up. But why did you write a book? Why did you decide to write the book? Because I don't think you talk about it enough.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not asked that often. I actually was very resistant to writing a book for a good while, and I went into that trip I didn't have any requirements from the fellowship to produce anything from it. So just on my own, I wanted to blog a little bit so that I wouldn't have to be emailing my mom every day and trying to keep different people posted. And then I also just kept a journal for my own purposes. Like I knew I'd want to someday look back and kind of remember what I was going through and all that. And so I came back, a year after traveling, and one of my really good friends from high school, a teammate actually, is now a literary agent, and it was her idea, and she kind of put it in my mind. And for almost a year, I was like, "Thank you for that idea. That's very kind, but no, that was like, how can you capture a year when you're like constantly on the go, meeting people, doing things? How can you capture that on paper?" So I just thought, that's too overwhelming of a task. I can't do it justice. No, thank you, but no, thank you. And then finally, the idea was like still in my mind. And I just finally came around to it thinking like, well, I'll at least put together a proposal, for a publishing company. And if something happens of it, cool, I'll pursue it. If not, that's fine. I'm not set on doing this anyway. So the ball kind of got rolling, and then I got more into it. And ultimately, I kind of came to see it as like almost like a long thank you note to the many, many people who hosted me and ran with me and showed me around and just kind of took me under their wing in their own cities. So, yeah, that's how it happened.
All right, so I have a bunch of follow-up questions, and I'm assuming a lot of people will have some too. So you talk about different aspects of running in your book. You talk about warm-ups, you talk about eating habits, you talk about workouts, but you don't talk about strength training. And this is particular when it comes to Ethiopia is where I'm curious about this. Was there different approaches to strength training throughout the world, or is it pretty much formal, like the same thing as we do here in North America?
I didn't really see too much strength training in most of those countries, and maybe some of it was lack of me asking, but for the most part I just kind of shadowed the people that I was staying with and like the people I was running with. I will say in Ethiopia there is very little supplementary work, at least from what I saw. Not much core. They do a bunch of drills, like different than what we do, and I have a bunch of videos of those. I'll at some point get around to putting up, but they do a bunch of drills, but no strength work that I saw, at least in terms of like using equipment or body weight to work on like building muscle. Didn't really see any core. In other places, I think, I don't know, distance runners are like, and I think this is changing, and it's changed a lot in the last like 5 years. Distance runners are kind of averse to the weight room, I think.
They can join the club.
Yeah, and I've been coming around to it more in the last few years, but certainly in college and while I was traveling, that was an afterthought. That was not something that was a priority, and that's pretty much what I found. There were for sure a few people that I stayed with, or like more elite, like Olympic level runners that I met along the way who did have their own routines. And like I got to see some of that, but that was not a major part of many of the traditions that I explored.
So you mean Haile Gebrselassie wasn't there pumping iron the whole time?
I can't speak for him, but I don't know of any. I'm not sure about his strength routine. I saw his house, and I don't remember. I remember seeing a treadmill, but I don't remember seeing weight equipment.
Okay. All right. So, and this question was submitted to me a lot. So do you have advice for somebody who's interested in embarking on a similar trip? So maybe not able to cover as many countries. And then how did you find the contacts for places to stay? Because I think that was key, right? If you didn't have those contacts, it would have been a much different experience.
Yeah. So if this is a runner asking that question,
Yeah.
I think we are literally in the perfect sport to do this because I went into my trip thinking I was only going to go to 5 countries, and that was part of my proposal. I was applying for this fellowship, and I named the 5 countries I was going to go to. I planned on staying in an apartment or a hostel everywhere, and like as soon as I got to England and started making friends, that those plans just went out the window, and like so many people were hooking me up with friends and family, and they're like running clubs in different countries or just connecting me to different people. And so I found that the running community in like literally everywhere that I thought about going was very receptive to me and eager to show me around, show me what they do, let me jump in workouts. So for someone who's interested in doing something like that, I know I lucked out because this was a fellowship and like this was a grant that I was able to pursue whatever I wanted for 1 year all around the world. And so that's not something that's easy for people to just like up and go for a year, especially the funded part. That's nice. But I think I kind of see it as like having kids or being injured. There's never like a convenient time, but you just have to like do it, commit to doing it. And it's hard now because traveling is like suspended for a while, but I think it's just a matter of like deciding to do it and just going for it. Because I know so many people who say they love travel and they can't wait to get out again, but like 1 year later, they're still working their same 9 to 5. They haven't taken like a big vacation or anything like that. And so if you care about it, just like set aside some of your paycheck every month and start. The way that I connected with people, it also evolved as I went. Sometimes it was in person, like this all started like my itinerary exploded basically based on one person that I met in England who is from Ireland and part of this rich Irish running tradition. And so he was like, oh, you got to go stay with my friend Kieran and meet my coach Patsy. So then like it just took off from there. So sometimes that would happen in person. If I was ever going somewhere and I didn't have a contact and I was still set on going there, I would just kind of start emailing, like Google searching or Facebook or whatever, like running clubs in Auckland or wherever I was going. And more often than not, like someone would pretty quickly respond. And if they couldn't help me, they'd pass me on to someone who could. And, the running world's like pretty small too. If I reached out to, let's say like someone who went to my university is from Switzerland, I could like reach out and just say, hey, do you know anyone who would be willing to like let me train with them for a few weeks, or who has a guest room or something like that. So I had to learn to put myself out there more and like ask for things, and I think that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. And so that's a hard thing, but there's other ways to do it. Hostels are cheap. Since that trip I've traveled plenty and have always kind of found a way to do it on a budget, cooking wherever you're staying, and there's ways to do it.
There you go. Advice from the pro. Okay, so you ran in Ethiopia and you trained with the Yaya girls. Is that right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Have you heard, and then you said you may not have heard, you may never hear from them again, right? Because of the maybe technological challenges they have. So have you heard anything from them, and have they had any breakthroughs in their running that you know of?
So I was there at the very end of 2012. Didn't hear a word from them because they don't have computers in this rural village. The Yaya girls didn't have computer access, and there's also not a reliable postal system. So, and then I had a couple of friends who were also at Yaya, either working or visiting, and within a few months they were all gone. So I just didn't have a way to keep in touch with them, and that was hard. But the most amazing thing happened because I went back to Ethiopia 5 years later in 2017. Went back to stay at Yaya Village, and unfortunately, that program had disbanded, so the girls weren't around, and I didn't know many of the people. And I went on a run in the same forest that I used to run in my first trip. And on one of my last runs of my second trip, I see this silhouette off in the distance, and I'm thinking, like, that looks a lot like Durartu, but there's just no way. That would be like too random. But I like got closer to her and closer to her, and sure enough, it was Durartu, and I yelled at her, and I was also thinking, like, she's not going to remember me. This was 5 years ago. She was so much, like, she was a much bigger part of my life than I was in hers, I'm sure. But I yelled at her, and like, it took her a second, and it immediately clicked after that. We like had this huge embrace. We're both in tears. And the kind of crazy thing is that we still couldn't really communicate because I don't speak Amharic more than a few words, and she doesn't speak more than a few words of English. And, we still had like such a good connection through running and eating and just like hanging out 5 years earlier that we were able to kind of rekindle that on the run.
Did they ever, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but beyond that, no, I don't know.
So
and
you
I
don't know if they need to go to Alan's races anytime soon or
don't. I don't know. I don't think the other two are still running anymore, at least from what I could gather. I know one of them got married and had kids, and I think has kind of moved on. And the other one, I think, is now working in tourism. Okay. So I would like to go back. I was planning on going back this spring, but that, of course, didn't happen. So hopefully I can find some updates at some point.
All right. So my last question, and I'm sure you get this one a lot. If you could go back to only one country, which one would it be?
I would have to say Ethiopia. There were so many countries that I loved, like Switzerland's high up there, New Zealand, Australia. Like, I would go back to all of them for sure, but Ethiopia is the one that I just feel like my heart is in. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and sharing with your friends and on social media. Take care, and we'll see you next time.